Today, we get into the copper industry. We discuss the biggest macro factors impacting price. We look at the fact that the world already consumes 28 million tons of copper per year, and almost every forecast adds another 10 million tons within the next 10 years. How are we going to meet that demand and realize our renewable, decarbonized future? We can't do it without more copper. Today, we discuss whether or not that's a possibility. Enjoy this interview. I'm glad you came in, and I'm excited to catch up with you because we haven't sat down in like 6 months or so, but I am quite certain that right now we are witnessing the early innings of a true global race for copper. When I look at the activities of the majors, right? Some of the bids being put in the marketplace right now, and some of the capital and how it's being allocated. I feel like there's a few people in the industry who have been watching this very closely for a long time. You're one of them, Rick Rule, Ross Beatty, a few others that have been talking about this cliff coming to the copper sector, and it's here now in terms of what we have and what we need in the decade moving forward. So I want to talk about that with you today. I want to talk about copper macro and what you're paying attention to. Obviously, we got to talk about Copernico and what you're building and what you've been building for 10 years and what you're about to bring to the market. It's super exciting. So there's lots of stuff for us to cover, but let's begin with your macro take. Copper's making headlines in every major press these days. Like there were 2 more headlines in Bloomberg this morning. What are you paying attention to, Ivan, copper macro fundamentals right now?
Sure, yeah. Well, copper was probably one of the most easiest markets to understand. It generally goes with the economy. That's been the traditional pathway for copper, Dr. Copper. The whole game changed with the electrification of the planet and this modern climate change initiative. And, there's no shortage of copper in the world. I just want to make that very clear. But there is a shortage of quality copper. And what I mean by that, there's plenty of low grade, huge volumes of copper. There's probably copper in your backyard and in my backyard, but economic copper that you could actually mine, that's going to be an economic grade or something you could finance with infrastructure nearby in quantities or volumes that are needed to meet this big copper demand that's been growing since the EV kind of world took off. That's the challenge. It's quality copper discoveries. And I say that out loud because a lot of the critics will say, hey, there's copper everywhere, and they'll point towards lower grade copper mines that could come online. And I agree with that. There will be long-term supply benefits from copper coming on at a lower grade, but the problem there is you can't produce faster. You can just produce more copper in general over time. So there's still a slow pace of supply. What changed the whole world's copper outlook recently, outside of the recent demand that's been growing from EVs, is the Cobre Panama shutting down that mine in Panama. We're now in copper deficit. Speaking with one of my directors, Keenan Jennings, who's recently with BHP, I had asked him when he came over in January to our board, I said, what was BHP's outlook on copper? And he said, I would assume 450 by year end.
Okay.
So we're ahead of schedule, which is great. I've spent 9 years waiting for an asset, cultivating an asset in the space. It's great to be a visionary. It's great to think ahead. But I look for something that makes money in all commodity markets, not in this commodity market. I just knew at some point we were going to get this lift. And I would love to take credit for my perfect timing. But in this case, it's actually timed us. But we would have been happy with 325 copper had that been where it is instead of where it is today.
I love how you can work on a project for 10 years and then say perfect timing. Again, like I had Ross on my show a couple of weeks ago, and we were just talking about like, how do you get to a place in your career where you've delivered, 14 10 baggers, like 14 10x returns? Was there ever an aha moment? And he's like, there was never one. There was no magic. There was no aha moment. I just kept working until eventually happened. Backing up to the supply. So I think we consume about like 26 million tons per year right now. And everyone's got their own forecast for sure, but consensus lands somewhere around increasing consumption by another 10 million tons by 2035. Right? And so the question everybody's asking is obviously where's it going to come from? You shared a bit of light on that. It reminds me of the Rick Rule quote about uranium that he's been touting for like 10 years. Either the price goes up or the lights go out. One of those two things has to happen, and we know which would make more sense. And obviously the price is going up, and that's becoming realized right now. And I honestly feel like, and I don't think this is sensational at all, that we're in that same place right now with copper. When you look at the demand forecasts, when you look at the time and money it takes to put new mines into production, and you look at the activity that the majors are undertaking, they understand how long it's going to take to put new mines into production. So they're focused on buying existing production because they just want to capitalize on what will eventually become rising prices, because either the price goes up or we just shut the economy down. And which one of those two things is more likely?
Yeah, on that point, that's a great point. 20 to 30 years for a new copper discovery to make it to market.
Yeah.
And in the top 10 major copper mines in the world, 3 of them are going to expire in the next 15 years. So as much as we're excited about to find new copper supply or to go down in grade to look at lower value copper, there's going to be 3 major mines shutting down the next decade as we're moving into this copper crunch, which really makes it even more compelling and more of an exciting sector to go into. Rick's comment is really, really smart one. You know, if you either fix price or you shut out the lights, right? I think that's brilliant. As far as the way I see it is, the length of time is one thing, but the scarcity is the other. And you've got to go into tough parts of the world if you want to find the big ones. And they exist. You can go to South America, Peru, Chile, Ecuador. These are very prominent areas, but there's geopolitical risk. Permits take time. There's a lot of hurdles to get through down there, and we've earned the right now to take a big swing at a Peruvian major discovery. You can go to the stands, which are very challenging. There's a lot of endowment there as well. And that challenge gets worse when prices go up in a lot of these countries. In Keegan, my first company, we went from zero, we found 5 million ounces of gold in Ghana. Stock went from 10 cents to $9 per share. I think we went from $1 million to $900 million valuation. And in that process, we put out a feasibility study, but during the feasibility study, the Ghanaian government, as gold was running in late 2011, they changed their royalties and their tax rules. So they were taking a 10% carried interest. They had a 3.5% NSR that jumped to 5.5% NSR, and they raised the corporate taxes from 20 to 30%. That crushed our feasibility. We still built the mine, and it's producing today 250,000 ounces a year. But governments get greedy when prices go up. Some places will nationalize, some places won't. So it's not as easy as let's go get production, it's waiting for us, or let's go take a discovery through, it's waiting for us. The new ESG initiatives and the new world we all live in is compoundly different than it was before in terms of the hoops, the hurdles, and what you have to do. And we pride ourselves in what we've done in South America. We'll get to that in a moment. But I look at this as an industry that's much harder than it's ever been before to find things, to bring things online. And you have a population that's doubled since the 80s on the planet. And that exponential growth of the population, the need for development, the need for electrification, it's the one sector that I think the world hasn't paid enough attention to, because other markets were taking all the attention in crypto or cannabis, all these other markets.
Sure.
And so it's the most ignored sector, probably by far the most undervalued sector. That's probably the most needed sector. And that's the compounding effect of the perfect storm that we're sitting with today.
Right. And when we look at the major activities, so obviously last week, BHP made a bid for Anglo. They offered $39 billion. Anglo rejected it, as they should. I think BHP probably knew it would get rejected, and they're going to come back with a more competitive offer. Interesting that they debated making a bid like 5 years ago on Anglo, and they really just wanted the copper assets. But I think at the time, the idea of dismantling the rest of Anglo just to get access to the copper was too much of a headache. But fast forward 5 years to today, now that headache's worth it to get access to those copper assets. Teck Resources recently sold off their metallurgical coal assets to Glencore for $8 billion. They're turning around and investing that cash into a variety of things, including copper, including you guys. So Teck is purchasing 9.9% of Copernico. I want you to walk me through their strategy of capital allocation, what they see in Copernico and what they're up to with you guys.
Sure, it's a great comment. And you remember Newmont buying Goldcorp not long ago. So you saw the gold guys do it first. Gold ran, and now you see the copper guys positioning for the big crunch that's coming in copper.
Definitely.
We had a handful of majors that have been on this project since 2018, when we kind of started to see the evidence that there was a lot of probability behind Sombrero, our flagship asset. And to hold on to a project for 9 years That's a lot of perseverance. That's a lot of personal capital investing into the company. I'm into the investment for about $6 million. I was buying Oren from $1 to $4 per share before we.
That's the preceding company that you spun Copernico out of.
So Copernico spun out of Oren. So that's where I made the first bet. The first half of that check was for a gold asset called Committee Bay. The second half of that check was for Sombrero, because we finally learned it. And when we spun it out, it took a real big left turn. We had some local presidents of communities and mayors that were really far left, anti-mining. So we had a couple years of challenging up until November of last year, where we finally got social access. And you take a lot of critique when you do a spinco and people want it to trade the next hour and the next day, and they want permits in a record time frame. And I wanted to deliver that because I'm very well aligned with shareholders. But at the same time, it was a long path to a great outcome, and the project was a big enough swing with enough probability. And the thing that drove me and kept me going to hold on to this for 9 years, for this whole length, was the interest from majors, Teck, and about 4 other of the larger mining companies in the world. They all came to it, they recognized it, and I kept getting the report card of, this is a top 5 asset, globally. It meets all the check marks of an opportunity that could develop into something substantial. And the analog for Copernico, for Sombrero, is the first target is a direct analog to Las Bambas. This is the 8th largest copper mine in the world. We have ore grade mineralization on surface, potential ore grade mineralization.
When you say direct analog, just for people to understand, looks like you're in the same copper belt.
Yeah.
And the minerals look very similar.
Great question. So this belt improves, called the Andahuaylas-Yari belt. It has about 7 or 8 of the larger copper mines in production or have been found that will go into production in the world. The most notorious one is Las Bambas. It sold for $7 billion in 2014 at $3.25 copper. It was $5.8 billion plus money spent. Glencore sold it to MMG at the time. It's been producing since. It had a few interruptions along the way, as any good major mine will have, but it's running very smoothly today as I sit here with you. In our world, the western half of this belt had a thin layer of volcanic cover. A volcano erupted, and it covered the western half of the belt with volcanic ash, which is kind of masked the opportunity. And if you look at the name of our project, it's called Sombrero, which means hat in Spanish, and there's a few holes in the hat. And that's where a gentleman by the name of Miguel Cardozo, who's credited with the discovery of Yanacocha, a 61 million ounce gold deposit that's now a mine that's operated by Newmont in Peru. He had the vision that this belt extended, and just because it was covered, it wasn't there. The absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence, as is famously known in the exploration world. We got onto it with some young geologists from Newmont, and we had 2 years to really go and explore this project. We were getting over 200 meters of 0.5% copper. That's a very good grade on surface in this world of copper deposits. And we had some that was running almost 1%, over 100 meters. Mm-hmm. So we had these small windows. We started to see that kind of enrichment on surface, not enrichment, but grade on surface. We thought it could be enrichment until we found some drill holes right underneath that, which from surface, they went down 110 meters of the same grade or slightly better. And this gave us a third dimension, and that's exciting from an exploring perspective. You see it on surface, you see it in the third dimension, but what really moved us, and I think all the major mining companies that eventually led to this investment from Teck, was that first target we're going to drill is 10 kilometers long, with various windows of copper and gold on surface that are replicating similar grades that give us the potential to find something really, really huge. And that's something that really grabbed everybody. We don't know how deep it goes, but we know it's at least 400 meters from surface. But when you look at 10 kilometers of continuous targets and mineralization on surface with drill holes on the end of it, we use electrical currents and magnetic currents to shape what could be beneath the surface, and now we're all left to do is drill it. So we were in conversations with the major mining companies, and they all had significant interest. Keenan Jennings was the VP of exploration from BHP. He actually was the one who told me to spin out Copernico or Sombrero from Oren Resources, and we didn't have social access agreements in time until he actually retired from BHP a few months later last fall. I reached out to him, and as an explorer, aggressive explorationist, I want the mindset of a BHP on my board level, making decisions with me, helping me strategize not only how to explore it, but how to monetize it intelligently, and what pace to go at, and how to systematically scale a major discovery. It brought our level of technical expertise up a level. We do have another director from BHP on the board who was an executive running the VP of Geosciences, which is quality control. His name is Antonio Ribas. So we've kept the quality of what we're doing really high. We've found so many similarities and analogs to the mines next door, from the exact same rock packages of all those mines, the same style of mineralization, and most importantly, they were formed at the same time in the Eocene era. When the Earth was creating major discoveries, at certain eras, major mines were formed, and one of them was 40 million years ago, and that's when the intrusions or the event was occurring that formed this mineralization. So we spoke to a lot of the majors, and I got a chance to bring Keenan onto the board. He wrote a check, he invested into the company, which you don't see often with geologists, but it's a big compliment, a third-party validation, more on the internal side. And then we sat down with Teck, and they had obviously recognized the opportunity early on. And we discussed what kind of capital would be needed to get that first answer and what that would look like. And we all came up with about a $15 million minimum, which would give us about 8,000 to 10,000 meters of drilling. And that would give us about 18 months of working capital. We could drill it 3 times in 3 different areas and really identify that this system is working, or that thesis that this could be the next Las Bambas could be potentially coming true. And you have to measure that and ask, what if they're getting on to another Las Bambas scale discovery? What if the grade is around 0.5%, 0.6%, which is the grade of Las Bambas? What could that be worth today in a $4.50 copper market that's projected by many to be going into the $5 to $7 range? And that's where it gets really exciting for us as shareholders and as explorers. And getting through the social axis I talked about, some areas are tougher. We went down there, and through Christian Rios, our SVP of corporate development, we brought agriculture into the Andes. Finding a mine is extremely gratifying financially. It's like winning a lottery, basically, in a sense, as an investor, if you get it right. My first company, as I said, 10 cents to $9 per share. That's a big win. In the case of that company, the first mine we found, you look back on it, you've spent the money. Money comes and goes, we all know that. But the 8,000 people we impacted are still being impacted today in a very positive, sustainable way. And that's something that we carry on as management, as a board, that we could leave a very, very positive footprint. In southern Peru, you get down to areas that are fairly remote, not with infrastructure. We have amazing infrastructure. We have power, water, roads, towns nearby, but with people that understand mining. And we asked, what can we do here to leave a very sustainable, positive footprint? And we took the long road, and we took the expensive road, because the probability of the project is quite high. And so we decided we'd treat this like it's going to be a huge mine one day, and we brought in nutrition. At the Andes, there isn't much red meat. There's an iron deficiency. We brought in French cows, Australian lambs. We brought in fish farms, ways to cultivate their meat. We've put in about $500,000 in total, where we sponsor these agricultural programs. We are the first junior to do this in South America, at least to this extent, and many are following suit with what we've done. The grant that we would achieve from the government also gets an investment from the community, which makes it very sustainable. So whether we find a mine or not, these communities should be able to benefit with agriculture in the Andes for multi-decades, multi-generations to come. We have $4 million US of additional agricultural programs we're applying for grants for not just our main community, but the neighboring communities as well. And that just sums up the most important facets of a mine, is the people impacted by it and the investors. And our investors to date have contributed towards this. And now, if we find a mine, it has to benefit this community even more over time. And I think you'll see a theme of a lot more participation between the communities and the major mines that are being found or operated. And that's the way it should be. We're big fans of that, but we're very proud that we're able to do that. And now we're going to get a chance to drill some of the most exciting holes in my 25 years of being in the sector, when copper is about to take off in price.
Okay, so first of all, congratulations on the agriculture program, because I did look into that. I couldn't pronounce the name of it. How do you pronounce this?
Agrodias.
Agrodias. Yeah, all right. Leave it to the guy who spends a lot of time in Peru. But anyways, phenomenal project, Ivan. Yeah, very commendable. And yeah, $500,000 invested thus far, and path to scale up to 4 million. lots of resources provided to the local community, laying the groundwork for a successful project, right? That's how you're thinking about this, that we're here for the long term. We know what this can become, so we're laying the groundwork today to put ourselves in the right place and support the community and onboard support of our project, which is so important in this industry. You mentioned Keenan Jennings, and I just want to spend a minute on him because when you brought him onto the board, I looked into this guy, like fascinating human being. And yes, he was the VP of metal exploration at BHP and found 2 discoveries, and they brought them 2 discoveries, right? One in South Australia, one in Arizona. And then he worked with Rio, right, in China and Mongolia.
He ran Oyu Togo for Rio Tinto.
That's right. One of the biggest copper and gold mines in the world. Running resource strategy, and then like at least 20 years in Chile and Peru with Anglo and BHP. So in terms of like the guy that you want on your project, like that's him, right? Phenomenal experience, probably helped bring in some major interest. I don't know, but I could speculate that was likely the case.
Yeah, so look, it's there's 2 types of people you can have on your board. People that make it look good and people that make your company really good. And Keenan's one of those people that contribute to make our company really good. I started my career following a guy named Dr. Roman Shklenka. He found 6 major mines in the world. And this was my teacher of all geology. And then I worked with Dan McCoy, where we found this assay deposit in Keegan, my first company, and the assets in Mexico that led to Caden's success. And I learned so much from Dan and from Roman, and I raised probably around $750 million as needed for companies I've been involved in. That's the kind of capital raise I've been part of. And from that, you've learned how to do things well, and you've learned how to do things better. And when I met Keenan, I think in the first 3 months of getting to know him, about 6 hours of time with him on the phone and listening to his perspective about how to approach exploration, this was probably the most important last 10% that I was looking to learn of my entire 25 years of exploring and looking for things. And there's no magic formula that he gave me, but he has an MBA as well as he's a geologist. So the commercial-minded geologist is paramount, especially for junior exploration or any kind of exploration, because you have to think about what things cost and what things mean and how they mean to shareholders. And so he's really enhanced that. Our VP of exploration is a gentleman by the name of Tim Kingsley, who I met a year and a half ago. And this is a pretty interesting dynamic. So we had a couple guys from Newmont, and I like to say the project outlasted the geologist, but they referred this gentleman, Tim Kingsley, to me, came in and we told him how great the project was. We showed him all the data, told him all the major mining companies were paying a lot of attention to this asset. And the first thing Tim Kingsley said to me when I asked him what he thought of it, he said, I'm sorry, I can't tell you till I go see it. I was like, but every company likes this asset and it's so obvious, it has so many analogs. He goes, look, it's just who I am. And so I walked out of the boardroom and I was like, wow, this is hard to digest, but it's awesome. This geologist is a very, very measured, prudent guy that needs to see, touch, and feel, and he doesn't believe easy. And that's the best person you can have at the head of the project, working with myself, Keenan, and everyone else. And
a skeptic.
Yes, a skeptic, a realist, I think is the word there. And, it's very easy to get excited about the rocks, especially when you look at them from a long time. So we got fresh perspective out of Tim Kingsley. We got fresh perspective out of Keenan Jennings. They both went to the project 2 weeks ago, and so did Christian Rios, our SVP of corporate development. He's a Peruvian geologist as well. And I'm asking each one of them, what was your thought? What was your thought? What's the takeaway? And I kept getting back, huge system, very robust model, independently from all 3 of them. And that just supports the thesis of this could be something in the top 10 or 20 in the world, in the copper sense, where it would actually potentially have the grade that makes sense, and this would be worth the 9 years and then some if we get it right. It will take 3 holes to make this discovery real and to feel it with every shareholder in the capital marketplace. And it'll take 2 to 3 years to find out that it's not there. Mm-hmm. So that's the scope of how big it is. There's so many targets that are in the pipeline that add to the first ones I've spoken of. It's a multi-generational exploration project in a part of Peru that we're the first to really get social access here and open up this entire district, where we have 100,000 hectares of prospective ground that we're going to explore. You get to 2 phases when you're exploring. Can I monetize it? Because I'm a shareholder first and I'm a CEO second. And that's a real serious commitment I've had since I stepped foot into this industry. The share price has to perform. Second one is it going to be big enough or worth enough for somebody else to buy it? Because we're not miners, and that's not where we're going with it. Our job is to go and find, explore, de-risk enough of it to create enough value for our shareholders before a major miner takes it. And having been through the selling of a company, I sold Caden back in 2014, having been through purchasing companies as well with Oren, and when I spun out the companies, I know both sides of M&A reasonably well, and I would say that this is probably one of the most coveted assets I've seen with an audience of buyers that could potentially buy this if this thing starts to work out, and it's matching perfect time. So very high corporate tension. Very happy Teck came on board because of the attention we get with them and the alignment with the view of the project, and can't wait to drill, the next 9,000 meters and see if this thing really goes to the next level. But it's in a very exciting time for us.
So Teck is newly on board. Newmont's already been on board. You're filling up the treasury right now. You've got drill permits in hand, and you've got a reputation in this business for running very expansive exploration programs, which I love. And you walked us through your initial plan here for the next 8 to 10,000 meters. So for prospective shareholders who are looking at the company right now, looking at Copernico and saying, okay, what can I expect from a news flow standpoint for the next 4 to 6 months? What would you tell them?
Keep adding more projects to the pipeline. There's areas we have access to now we did not have access to earlier. So you're going to hear about more and more opportunities that come up as we're drilling the first 4 or 5 opportunities around the big system that we've identified to date. It's going to be a combination of very probable areas and very mysterious areas where we can't see and touch the rocks that we're targeting. There's a thin 5 to 20 meters thick of volcanic covers over some of those areas. And so the surprises could be massive. This is a huge system. Is it 300 meters wide on average? Is it 100 meters wide on average? Is the grade 0.5%? Is it 1%? It's a skarn. Skarns are known to be very variable, and they're known to be really rich in grade. And we see evidence of both, but we also see width occurring on surface where the skarn mineralization exists. Skarn's a geological term. If I was to give you a metaphor, an analogy for it, if you think about you cut your finger and you're bleeding. When the scab forms, that's a crusty scab. That's basically the skarn. Underground volcanoes coming to surface, when it interacts with various rocks that are not part of this intruding underground volcano, if it's mineralized, a crust forms, which is like the skarn, and that crust becomes the richest part of the system. And why that forms is because the underground lava or the intrusion of volcanoes coming to surface, it chemically reacts with limestones and sediments, and it's like a baking soda and vinegar event where it just explodes with copper and gold. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for the contact, and we have 10 kilometers of that contact to explore around the major system. And again, skarns notoriously have fairly good grade. Everything we're drilling in this first 15 to 24 months is going to be from surface to the top 300 meters. We're going after the low-hanging fruit, the open pit potential. There are targets in this system that go down for 800 meters, 1,000 meters from surface. They're huge. We're going to drill those too, but not right away. We want to get a handle on the system. We want to create the performance in the share price, give ourselves a chance to raise more capital if needed, and keep the project moving forward so that there's no financial pressure down the road, and there's a lot of results that can come out before we say the F word again, which is financing.
Yeah, right. You're going to go back to the market with some questions answered, right?
Yeah.
Mission critical.
If you look at that in 3 phases of drilling that we would do, you have enough money to drill 2 more times after the first time you drill.
Got it.
And if you hit, you don't need to take money on that hit. You can wait. If you don't hit, you got 2 more swings of the bat for that home run before you do. So that's the best we can do for shareholders, is create an environment where, and the project gives us this opportunity, there's a lot of longevity of exploration. There's a lot of ways to win. There's a lot of ways to miss. And I'm not afraid to miss at all, but I just want to keep swinging for something big for a very long time. And that's what this project represents.
I get it, man. Look, I love how you think long term. I love how you can keep your head down on a project for 9 years, put 35 million to work, and then say, oh, I got lucky with timing with the copper market. I love that. And it's a real treat to get you in the studio today and chat with me, and I'll be keeping my eyes on it. And I'd love to have you back, like, midway through this program, maybe 6 months or so, we'll get the update.
Yeah, thank you. I've been lucky 3 times in my career. I've found a mine. It's a producing mine. I've delivered a great shareholder return to investors. We got to sell a mine during the finding of the mine after the first 100 holes. And then the 3rd time was to get behind an asset of this magnitude. You often look for these things, if you love exploration, that could be the bigger ones on the planet, but you never get a chance to take a shot at them. And so far, we found the opportunity. That was the first lucky part. The second one was getting the social access and the drill permits. And the 3rd one, we'll wait and see. Hopefully it's the big discovery we've been looking for our career. So we'll see.
We will wait and see.
Yes.
All right. Thanks,
Thank you
Ivan.
so
I
much.
appreciate your time today.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.